Hi, my name is Tony. The tape that you're about to view is set up for the amateur. We're going to go through the basics of how to start the tattoo in a tattoo business. What you're going to want to do is check with your local towns before you even attempt to start tattooing on a business level. We're going to run through all the machines that you're going to need, what type of equipment you're going to need. You're obviously going to need to start out with some artwork. You can use clip art. You can buy tattoo flash, as they call it. There's catalogs available. There's a lot of suppliers that you can get this type of stuff from. You're going to want to start out with some real basic tattoos when you first start out in the business. The more advanced tattoos are going to come later. We have other videos that are available that are going to go into advanced shading and coloring and start to do some of these larger pieces of work. There's a lot of money to be made in this business. It takes a little bit of practice, and this video is going to help you go through pretty much everything from how to set your machine up, what colors to use, and how to put an actual tattoo onto somebody. You're going to see the whole thing right on this tape. Now I'm going to show you some basic tubes that you'll need. There's outlining tubes, there's coloring tubes, and then there's shading tubes. This is a basic outlining tube. You'll notice that the hole is smaller. Outlining tubes will take a smaller needle. This particular tube is set to hold a 3-needle outliner. This is a basic shading grip. The hole here can hold up to 7 needles. It can also be used as an outliner for thicker outlines when you're going to use a 5-needle outliner, which we'll show you in a minute. This is a basic flat shader. Notice the size of the hole. This can hold up to 22 needles, and they will be a flat configuration, which we'll show you also. These are two different types of grips that come on the tubes. You can see this one is much fatter than this one. There's two reasons for those. One reason for the heavier grip, some people prefer that in their hand. It just feels more comfortable. Also, if you're putting in a lot of black ink, it works as a counterweight on the tattoo machine. It'll give you a little bit more weight to put the tattoo ink in a little bit deeper. Mostly it's for comfort. All of the tubes that we've shown you have been sealed in sterilized packages, and this is what they'll look like when you start to use them. This is a set of sterilized tattoo needles. This is the way they'll look before you use them. We're going to start out showing you two basic needles that you're going to use. This is an outliner and this one is a shader. The difference is the outliner is pushed into a point. The shader, the needles are a little more separated and more in a brush-like configuration. These are some of your basic supplies you're going to need to start your tattooing. In the foreground you can see we have some ink caps. We have two different size ink bottles. We have a bottle of green soap and a bottle of alcohol. The ink caps come in several different sizes. This is a basic size that you're going to use for a tattoo. Inks also come in two different sizes. You can purchase them either way. This is a 2-ounce bottle and that's an 8-ounce bottle. It's just a matter of how many colors you're going to use. Some colors you're going to go through faster than other colors, so you'll probably wind up purchasing them, such as blacks and reds, in larger quantities. The green soap, that's surgical tincture of green soap. That's used to wash down the tattoo area before you start, and during the process of the tattoo you're going to be spraying the green soap to keep the area clean. The alcohol will do two things. Before you apply your stencil, you clean the skin with the alcohol, and also when you change colors you're going to use the alcohol to spray through your machine into the tube to clear the ink out. These are two basic power supplies that you're going to need to run your tattoo machine. The one at the top has basically your on and off switch, and this dial here will regulate the amount of power that you're going to send to your tattoo machine. The one in the bottom is a little more elaborate. It has a volt and an amp meter, which will give you more of a visual on how fast your machine is going to run. You can still set it here, but then you can see how much volt and how much amps you're putting out. That's something we'll get into later. The switch holes on the front, there's obviously one for a foot switch and one for your clip cord, which we're going to show you in a minute, that shows how to hook this up to the machine. These are some of the other accessories you're going to need that go along with your power supply unit. This is a set of clip cords and a foot switch. There's two different types of clip cords you can use. These have a terminal that hooked to the back of the machine. This is a typical RCA jack that plugs into the machine. And this one I've drawn here shows the tube and the needle would already be in and set in the machine. These are electromagnets, and then there's an armature bar, and then there's a front spring and a back spring that regulates the tattoo machine. Once you have this thing hooked up, your clip cords will clip into the machine. You'll see on most machines there's two little holes and this is a little spring on here. You'll just squeeze it together and it'll pop into there and it'll hold it into the machine. That's going to get plugged right into where it says clip cord on your box, and then you're going to have a foot switch that's going to plug in where it says foot switch. This is your foot switch, and what happens is you'll step on the foot switch and that will send electricity up here to the two coils, which will then magnetize them. That'll pull the armature bar down, and what happens there, the needle will then come out of the end of the tube. Once the armature bar comes down and touches the two coils, it breaks the connection. There's a little set of points up here. When that connection is broken, that shuts off the magnets and basically just shuts it off. So what it is every time you step on that pedal, you complete the circuit and it's going on, off, and it's just turning this on. And the faster it goes, how you set your box here, we'll talk about that in a minute, it will determine how fast this thing is going to come in and out of the skin. Once you set up your machine, you've got the needle set into the tube. And I'm going to talk about this again. The needle barely comes out the edge of the tube. That's how you set the depth. So when you're tattooing somebody, the deepest you'll ever be able to go once that needle comes all the way out is to the edge of that tube. And that'll determine the depth. You don't want to set that thing with the needle protruding out the end any more than just a fraction of an inch, just sticking out the edge of the tube. So it's a pretty basic operation to set it up. The adjustments that you can make on the machines where the points connect, there is a little set screw right here, and that will determine the gap in between there. It's just like a set of car points basically. When you're outlining, you can set this gap with a simple thing like a dime. You can take a dime and put it in between there and just turn the screw to the gap as to the width of a dime. For shading, you want your machine to run a little bit slower, so you're going to open this up and set it to the size of a nickel. And that's a pretty basic gap on a tattoo machine, so it'll run at the proper speed. You're going to have two rubber bands going across. You'll see that on every tattoo machine. Once the machine starts going, the needle's going up and down, but you don't want it to sway back and forth, and the rubber bands actually keep that needle from moving too fast in the tube back and forth. It keeps it real steady. So as you draw, the tattoo line is not all jagged. It's a real smooth line, and the rubber bands make that. You'll change those rubber bands about every third tattoo. You can change them. They get stretched out. The clip cord that I showed on here, like I said before, this is a spring type that connects between the two posts on the machine. There's also an RCA jack that basically looks like the other end. Some tattoo machines have a little plug here that you can plug it in, and you can eliminate the idea of the old clip cord thing. The power units, they're going to vary depending on which type you have. Some have 2 meters on them, some don't have any meters on them, and the meters are just more regulation to run the machine. Basically, you're going to have a knob, and you're going to, as you turn it, you're going to turn up the voltage, and you're going to hear the machine run faster and slower. And when I show you the next thing we're going to do is we're going to tattoo some grapefruits to give you an idea how the machine works and what it looks like, and that's a good thing to practice on before you start doing people. So we're going to do that next. What we're going to show you here is a real easy way to practice, and we're actually going to practice on a grapefruit. You notice I'm wearing rubber gloves here. Always work with your machine, whether you're practicing or not, use the rubber gloves, because it's hard to get used to handling everything with rubber gloves on. If you do it without them, just for your practicing, when you really start to tattoo, you're going to put these gloves on and everything's going to feel different to you. So get used to working all the time with rubber gloves. You should always have them on. I'm going to show you again how to set the machine up. I'm going to set this up with an outlining needle. We're going to open up a package of needles here. That's set. What I'm going to use on this for the practice, this is a number 5. That means there's 5 needles in here that are pushed to a round point, and it's an outliner. It's a little different than the shader. I told you before, the shader is more like a brush type configuration of the needle. So we're going to set this one up in here. What you want to do is take the needle. You see how the hoop is on the bar? There's a little break in the hoop here. It's coiled that way. What you want to do is set that into the machine. Go through the bottom of the machine. Set it up. There's a little rubber grommet on the end of that armature bar. You're going to push the needle bar over that grommet so it's on there good and tight. Okay? If you have a problem getting this onto the grommet, I'll show you another way you can do it first. You can take the grommet right off the end of there. You can see there's just a little steel post. You can actually insert the grommet into the needle bar. Sometimes this is easier because they're hard to get on when they're on the machine. And then just run it the other way through the machine. Just pull it through. And then just stick the whole thing right on the end of the armature bar. You always remember that when you put this needle on, the hoop is going that way. So that's the way your needle is set. You'll see how the needle is soldered onto the bar. The needle's got to be on the bottom. The bar should be on top, the needle's soldered to the bottom. Now your needle's in the machine. You loosen up the chuck a little bit, that's going to hold the tube. We're going to get a tube out here. I'm going to use the tube here with a bigger grip on it, just because it's easier to look at. Slide that up inside of there, and then you're kind of basically threading the needle through the little end of the tube there. That's all you want to do is get it so it falls right inside the thing. And be careful with this too, you don't want to bend the needle when you're doing it, so go real slow. And then just draw that up and tighten this down. And I'm going to show you the end of this tube so you know how far it went in. We're going to tighten this chuck up here so the tube doesn't slide around. Now you'll be able to see the needle's in, the tube is set onto the bar. The needle is going to just, what you're going to do is loosen this again and just slide that tube up until that needle just protrudes through the bottom of the tube. And it's about maybe the thickness of a couple sheets of paper is all that needle is going to stick out of that tube. And I'm going to push on the armature bar up here and force the needle to come out so you can see about how far it's coming out. You can barely see it. You can, if you touch the end of this tube and wrap your finger across it, that needle would be barely coming out. And then when you push down on the bar, that's about how far you're coming out. I'll put this up against the glove, maybe you can see. So that's what the needle looks like. Barely sticking out of the tube, and when it's fully projected, it's coming out just about that far. You're just a few millimeters, it's coming out. You're only going down 3 layers of skin. You're not trying to dig down in there. Once you've got that set up, you take the 2 rubber bands and you just slide them down around the needle bar. If you remember before on that chart I was telling you, the needle's going up and down, the armature bar. Here's the set of contact points. So when I step on my foot pedal, that's going to send power through the machine. You're going to keep your foot on that pedal constantly, the machine will be running, and all the machine's doing is on, off, on, off, on, off. The foot switch has nothing to do with the on and off of the machine while it's running. You'll step on it, the machine will go. If you want to stop the machine, you take your foot off the pedal. Now that you've got the machine set up, I'm going to plug it in. I showed you on the other chart that you could use a set of clip cords that go between these 2 posts. I'm going to use an RCA jack on mine. It's got a little jack, so all I have to do is plug it in. I'm going to run the machine now, and you're going to be able to see it actually working right in here. You'll see I'm going to step on the pedal. My foot is on the pedal, the machine is running, and all it's doing is turning these magnets on and off and causing that armature bar to make a contact and then release, contact and release. And you can hear the machine running. It's not running too fast. I'm going to go over to my box here. I'm going to let the machine run, and I'm going to show you the difference in the sound. You can hear the machine run. That's a normal sound that your machine should run at. If it sounds like that, you're running the machine way too fast. If you run it like this, where it starts to sputter and hesitate, you're running the machine way too low. So all you have to do is just take your dial once you've got the machine set up and just keep turning the dial till you get it to sound at a nice, even, should just sound like that, a nice tone. And then you're pretty much ready to start the tattoo. We've got the machine set up now, and I poured a little bit of black ink in the ink cup. And what I'm going to do is we're going to practice on a grapefruit. This is a good thing to practice on because it's small, it's kind of hard to get straight lines to go across this, and that's a good practice because when you start on skin, it's not going to be a flat surface anyway. You're going to be on arms and legs and things, and they're going to be kind of rounded anyway. It'll give you a good feel for the machine. When you hold your tattoo machine, you never want to hold it straight up and down like this and push down into it. The machine gets held at a 45-degree angle, and you're going to just draw across like this. And we're going to start at the bottom and work up on all the lines. Later on in the video, you'll see when we're actually tattooing somebody, I talk about where to start on the tattoo, how you work from the bottom up, and it's pretty well explained in there. But for right now, all you want to do is just get a feel of what this thing's actually going to do. So we're going to start the machine, we dip it in the ink, and just take it and just run a little line. You're going to get a lot of ink that's going to splash around the edges and stuff like that. Have a paper towel ready, and you can wipe it off, and that's basically what you got. You want to get it so you have a pretty nice straight line. You can take a pen, you can draw some simple little figures onto here if you want, little flowers, curved lines, anything you need to practice with. Another good thing to practice with also, you can actually take a pencil and take your tube and your needle out, put the pencil up in here. You may have to wrap some tape around the edge of the pencil because it might not be as thick as this tube. Lock the pencil down, get some paper, and just sit and draw on paper to get the feel of the weight of this machine on your hand all the time. That'll give you a pretty good feeling of how it is. So, like I said, you're just going to practice on this whole grapefruit. You know, practice straight lines, and then you want to practice some like simple stuff like circles. You could do some curved lines on here, and just wipe it off so you can kind of see what you're doing. If you're trying to draw a straight line and you're winding up, and I'm going to draw a rotten line here, and you wipe your thing off and you're getting something like that, that means you're not pulling your hand across steady, you're not pulling it across slow. You want to do it in a real easy, sweet motion. You don't want to go too slow either. When you're actually tattooing somebody, you're not going to want to go and sit there and go that slow because that needle's going in and out of them. Once you start, you want to keep that machine moving. Take your foot off the pedal, it'll stop. And you look, that's the kind of lines you want to have. You want to have straight lines. You don't want anything jagged. You don't want them to look where when you're making the line, you're going to have a nice smooth line, then you're going to have a big ball of ink there. That'll happen if you're going too slow. What you're going to do is you're going to wind up with a straight line, and then all of a sudden, I don't know if the show go down this grapefruit, but we'll see how it looks. You know, you're going to have a real thick line, then you're going to have a thin line. You want that line to be like this. You want a one consistent look to the line as you're tattooing. And that's pretty much all you have to do to practice. I mean, get yourself a bag of grapefruits and do quite a few of those before you're even going to attempt to do someone's skin. Yeah. What I did now is I switched this over and I put a shading needle in there. This is a 7 shader. It's a round shader. And that's basically what you're going to be using to practice with and start your first tattoos are round shaders and outliners. You don't want to start, you'll see in some of the catalogs they have flat shaders and magnum shaders and they put in faster. You're not even going to want to mess with those. That's a little more advanced. You're going to start with a simple round shader. This is a 7 round. And what I did on the grapefruit, like I was saying, you can just draw simple little shapes on here. It'll kind of show you how to shade and stuff. Just always remember you're going to have a light source on any tattoo you do. Always think about the lights coming from one direction. So if it's coming from this side, you're going to want to shadow everything so your lights are on one side, your darks are on the other side. And you can practice with this just like you're doing skin. Just kind of, you're going to see a little bit more ink coming out. You can see a little puddle of ink there. Then when you actually do skin, you probably won't get that much ink because this surface we're hitting here is pretty hard, so it's projecting out. So skin's a little softer, obviously, so you won't get that. But you can basically just go around your shape and just kind of, you can shade different stuff. Just to get an idea, I'm just shading from one side and kind of just pulling out the machine so it gets a little bit of shading to it. You know, so start like each one of those, you can go around like that. And you can just wipe it off. And the center of this little design here, we'll fill it in. So just kind of follow it around and color. And when you color, you're going to color in small circles. You can see on the machine, I'm just barely making circles here. You're going to keep the machine moving, and each circle will overlap the last row that you did. And you're just going to keep doing that, and that's how you'll get a nice solid filled in area. And you'll see when we do the actual tattoo on somebody how this actually works. You can skip ahead on the tape and watch that, even though you're not going to start on skin, because you'll actually see what all this is doing and how everything is shadowed and shaded and how important that is when you're going to do the tattoo. But for now, you're going to just keep practicing on this kind of stuff. Practice your lines and outlines. So get yourself a few of these bags of grapefruits, because you're going to want to go through quite a few of those before you start on somebody. And again, always wear the gloves when you're working, you know. You're going to be working with skin, and there's going to be blood involved, so you're going to want to keep everything sterile, sanitized, and keep your hands protected. So always work with gloves, just as a practice. Just get into that habit of always wearing some good rubber gloves. Before you start the stencil, you're going to need a supply of tattoo artwork. This is called Flash. It's available at any tattoo supply house, or you can use clip art. You're going to need two pieces to this. You're going to need the color drawing, and you're going to need the line drawing. The line drawing is going to be used to make the stencil, and the color piece is going to be used as a reference piece. This you can set close by when you're doing the tattoo, so you can refer to this for all the colors. Now we're going to show you what you need to start the basic stencil. You need thermal carbon spirits. That's this type of carbon paper. You can't use regular typewriter carbon. It has to be a thermal spirit carbon paper. You need a sharp number 4H pencil, otherwise you won't get clean lines. Your picture, whatever flash you're going to use, we're going to do this rose. And then you want to just make a copy of that so we can transfer the stencil on to the carbon paper. I'm going to show you how to draw the stencil. You need to lay the copy that you made on your thermal carbon, and you want to make sure you put it on the dull side. There's a shiny side and a dull side to this paper. You want to make sure it's on the dull side, because that's where the ink is. Lay your drawing down on top of there, and then you can start to draw it. Make sure you follow every single line of the tattoo that you're going to put on. If you need to check it, turn your carbon paper over and you'll see that we missed a line here, we missed a few lines here. You can hold this up to the light and let the light shine through the back, and you'll see the original copy on the other side, and you'll see what lines you missed. So whatever you missed, just set it back down again and just go over those few lines that you missed. After you're finished with your stencil, it should look just like the front did. All the lines should be connected. It should be nice and sharp and clear, no smear marks, and then we'll show you how to put it on. Now we have all the stuff set up and we're ready to start a tattoo. We're going to show you basically how to set up the machine and the needles in the tubes. You'll notice that I've got the bottles wrapped with some plastic. You want to keep these, because every time you grab them, you don't want to get ink and stuff all over your bottles, even though you're going to be wearing rubber gloves. You always want to make sure you have your rubber gloves on when you're going to start to open any of these packages up, because they're all in sealed, sterilized packages. These black lines on here will indicate that the tubes have been sterilized. There's also indicators on the back of these. They turn a dark shade of brown or dark blue depending on the brand that you buy, and they let you know that everything has been sterilized. Okay? I'm going to show you how to set the machine up. So first thing I'm going to do is open up these needles here. You want to be very careful when you're handling the needles. You don't want to hit the point on anything. Actually, we're going to start out with the outlining needles. So you can look in there. There's an outliner and a shader in this package. And just look at them. The skinny one is the outlining needle. Leave the other one in the package for now because you're not going to be using it. First thing you want to do is hold the machine like this. You'll notice there's two rubber bands on the machine. That's going to come already on your machine. That holds the needle in place and keeps it from shifting side to side once the machine is running. So what you want to do is just lift those rubber bands up and just put them up on the top here. Set the needle, bring it up through the bottom of the tattoo machine, and the hook on the top of the needle bar always has to be to the left. You can't set it to the right. Then you mount, you push it onto the little armature bar, and you'll see that it's hooked on there and it's nice and tight on here. And you can drop the rubber bands down. That'll hold the needles in place. And you get your tube out. loosen up the bar a little bit, the opening, so the tube will fit into the bar. Then you just drop the bar down into the main tube and set your needle right through the end of the tube, which you'll see, it's pretty obvious, it goes right in there. Tighten up here so that your bar is tight. I'm going to try to turn this so you can see. Now the needle is set up. What you want to have is your needle barely sticking out the end of the tube. I mean, it just has to be just a slight amount out of the tube. And your machine is pretty much set up and ready to go. Always have the opening of the bar facing this way. This is the reservoir where the ink is going to be drawn up into. So you want to make sure that's to the front, not turned to the back. And that's pretty much it. Your machine's set up and ready to go. So what we do is just plug it in. I'll show you a little thing here that you can do when you're going to set up your ink caps and before you're ready to tattoo. You're gonna need some Vaseline. So just take a regular popsicle stick and never ever dip into this twice with the stick. One time. Take out a nice little amount of Vaseline. And then these little ink cups, this is where you're going to put, we showed you these before, this is where you're going to pour your ink into. The problem here is if you don't have an ink cup holder, which I really don't like to use, I like to use them flat on a white piece of paper here because it's easier to see the colors. And to get these things to stand good, just dip them into the Vaseline and stick them down to the table. And get your cups all set up. You're going to want to pour all your ink before you start the tattoo because you don't want to handle the bottles after you've been touching somebody. You don't want to contaminate anything. So get your bottle, all your cups set up, and then you have your bottle set here. And you want to set it up with the darkest colors towards the front because they're the ones you're going to use first. So just squeeze some ink into the cup, set up the black. You can set up the red. And some green. Red. Some yellow. Some white, which we're going to use for some highlights in the tattoo. And if you spill any of this onto the surface that you're working on, what I do is I put a piece of saran wrap underneath the white paper or paper towel that I'm going to use. So when I'm all done, I can pretty much just take this cellophane here, grab everything, wrap it up, and dispose of it, and I don't have a big mess. Then we're going to take the green soap, spray that on a rag, on a little paper towel, and you want to moisten the area. You don't want to get this too soaking wet. You don't want it where it's running down the green soap. You just want it damp. Then you've got your stencil that you drawn. You've got it all cut out, and you place the stencil on. Get it right where you want it, and then just push it on there. You don't have to push real hard, just enough so it makes contact on all the surfaces. Let that just sit there for a second. When you peel it off, you've got your stencil ready. You've got to make sure this dries for about 5 minutes or so. Let the customer stand up and look and make sure it's where they want the tattoo before you start it, because once you start, you can't move it. Before you start doing the tattoo, what you want to do is take a little bit of Vaseline and you want to put that over the tattoo. That'll keep, as you start tattooing and wiping, the ink won't stick into the pores of the skin. It'll wipe off real nice and easy. You don't have to keep rubbing on somebody. So just a nice thin layer. And then you're pretty much ready to start. You're going to take a paper towel and you're going to have that with a little bit of green soap on there. You use that for wiping it off. And then we're going to start the outline. You want to start the tattoo at the bottom and you want to work your way up to the top. You want to have your hand smearing the ink. And here we go. Just follow the lines that you drew the first time with the pencil. Every time you make a pass, you want to just wipe it off, and you don't want to wipe it too hard. You don't want to screw up your stencil. If it's dry goods, it should be okay. Just follow through all the lines. You'll tell when you start to run out of ink. Every time you dip the machine into the ink cap, you want to just be very careful when you're dipping it in. You don't want to put this all the way into the ink cap and never step on the pedal and have the machine running when you're drawing ink up into the machine. The ink will automatically just fill up a little reservoir right behind the needle, and you'll have enough. If you start to draw your line and you see it starting to get a little weak, that means it's time to stop. The machine, you can hear how the machine's running at a very smooth pace. It shouldn't bog down when it hits the skin. It should just keep running real nice and smooth. And then you wipe the ink again. You should always have a nice solid black line. You can see about the speed that I'm going with this. You don't want to go much faster than that when you're doing an outline. You want all the lines to show. Then wipe. Once you get up about that high, you can see we're already starting to get, this is getting a little smeared here from just our hand being on it, so you want to get that piece in there. Get that drawn. Every once in a while, you're going to put a little bit more Vaseline on the skin. You can just do that with your finger even. Just take a little bit and just smear it over there. The Vaseline's a big help. It keeps your hand sliding real smooth, and like I said, it keeps that ink from filling up in the skin. Your machine shouldn't be spitting ink. It should be going in just like it is on here. If your machine is spitting ink all over the place, then it's not adjusted right. You're probably running it way too fast. You might not be able to go this fast when you first start out. It takes a little bit to get used to. And again, just follow the lines, work from the bottom. Nice and smooth. That's how you want the machine to run. You don't have to over wipe the tattoo. You can see I'm doing 3 or 4 lines. Then I'll just take it and you can just wipe it off a little bit. And then you can put a little bit more Vaseline on there. Just remember with the Vaseline, don't gob that Vaseline on there. Just nice and thin. Just a thin layer. That's all you need. You can see when I stop there, that's how I'm reloading with ink, so you can get an idea about how long. Every machine will hold ink a little bit different, so you'll be able to tell if the line starts. If you draw a line and you start to see blood coming up, that means the ink's not going in. You don't have enough ink in your machine. It should have a little bit of puddling around the edge of the line, and you know you're working the ink in there right. We're almost done with this outline. When you're working on certain spots, you want to make sure that the skin is tight. If you're having a problem and the machine seems like it's bouncing on you, you want to just pull back so the skin is tight. If the skin's loose, the needle will bounce off the skin, and you'll hear your machine start to bog down. So arms and legs are usually a good place to start with your first couple tattoos. Stomachs are very hard. Chest areas are hard to do because the skin is softer and it'll bounce around a lot. So if the skin's nice and tight, sometimes you'll have to grab the skin like this and pull it back and do the tattoo to get the lines to go in. After you're done with the outline, what you want to do is take some green soap on your paper towel, clean the whole area off, check it real good, make sure you didn't miss any lines, and if you didn't, you're pretty much set to start to shade. I've already switched the machine over to the shader needle and put a shading tube in. And we're going to start out, first thing we're going to do is some black shading on this tattoo, and most people probably wouldn't realize that you're going to put black into this. If you just took this tattoo right now and started coloring it, you get what you call the coloring book syndrome. The thing looks just like a black outline with a bunch of color in it. It looks like a child did it. You want to highlight every one of these petals in the rose. You want to highlight the stem, some of the leaves. I'm going to show you how to do that right now. Put a little bit more Vaseline on there. What you're going to do is you're going to take I've already got some black ink in there. You're going to go up to each petal and just kind of follow it around the edge softly. Don't try to put it in real hard. If it looks like you're not getting any ink, that's okay. You'll see it. It'll eventually show up. What you want to do is just really lightly. You can see how it starts to give it a more three-dimensional look once you start putting in the black shading. Good black shading is the key to a good tattoo. If it's not black shaded, they'll just, like I said, they'll look like a coloring book, and you're going to have no depth to the piece of work when you're all done. And when you put that in, what you want to do is you're actually putting it, start here, and you're actually kind of flicking it out like this. So the needle is making contact, then it comes away from the skin, and that's what will give you a softer shade towards the end. So again, just kind of almost following that outline of those petals, just to get myself a little bit of a black line, and then you'll start to flip shade it, kind of get it come out. It's called a sweep shade, is what we're going to do on this. Some pieces are done in black and gray shading where the whole piece is just shaded, there's no color in it. And then you'll actually take the black ink and you'll dilute it a little bit. And that you'll be diluting it with some witch hazel. You can just cut the ink in half in your cup and you can get a soft shade also. I'm using straight black outline ink to do this. This is the easiest way to show you how to get some shading on a tattoo. You want to remember, you want to have a light source. You know, your shadows are coming from one side of the piece. You don't want them all the way around. I'm gonna have the light from the back side, so I'm gonna shade from the front on some of the center pieces, and I want to leave some openings there for color. And then again, up on the back petals here, you'll see the difference when I'm done here. What this is going to look like with just the black shading. From when we first started with the outline. You want to try to shade every single piece somewhere on it. Get a little bit of shading on every one of these petals. Otherwise, it's going to, like I said, it's going to just look really flat. This piece won't even look nice. It's already starting to take on some shape now. Where there's not any outlines and you want to get little dimples and stuff in the petals, just take it and sweep it up. And it'll add a little bit more dimension to the piece too. You can bring some of that black shading out and just up. You can see I'm not on the outline. I'm just a little bit before it. It'll start to make the petals look like they're curling at the ends a little bit. You do the same thing on the leaves, which are going to be green in the background. Just give them a little bit of shading where they touch the rose. That way you'll have a nice look. And then underneath, just remember, there's any place where two pieces overlap, that should be a shadow. Okay. You can always apply a little Vaseline too to the skin. You can see I'm not really over wiping this tattoo. You can if you want, but you don't really need to till you're done. And that's pretty much it. Follow these down a little bit. Now you're done with the outline, and what you want to do, now next we're going to just clean the skin off. Same thing, spray some green soap on there, and just wipe the whole thing off. Then you can put a nice little thin layer of Vaseline on there for a second, and that's what it should look like. It shouldn't be bleeding excessively. It should be every piece of this should be nice and shaded, so it already looks good now. It looks like it's a three-dimensional piece. Now we're going to put the color in on this tattoo. What you want to do is hold your machine like this with a paper towel, spray this with some green soap, you can see the ink come out of it, and just spray it with that for a couple minutes and let it run, because it'll clean the tube out. And then a little bit of alcohol. You have to be careful, don't bend the needle. You can take your paper towel, you can go right into here and you can clean out a little bit of that excess ink in there. You want it so it runs clear. Now it's ready for the first color. Okay, before you start putting the color in, you want to just put a little bit of Vaseline over it again. Same thing so it doesn't get all smeared. We're going to start with the red on this one. You don't have to worry so much now about starting at the bottom and working up, because the outline's already in the tattoo, so you're okay. You want to put this in small circles. You want to start with small little circles and just put the ink in. And with this red, don't go all the way to the edge of the stencil of your tattoo, your outline. You want to leave a little bit of light at the edge of each one of these petals to give it a nice highlight. So just keep going. When you get just small circles is how you want to put it on. You want to go like this, you don't want to go like, small tight circles overlapping each other. That'll put the ink in nice and solid. And then wipe it off. If you missed any spots, just go back, small circles again, and put it in. And you're going to do this around the whole tattoo. You can see you're going to wipe it a little bit more than you did before with the outline because you're putting a lot more ink down. You don't want to get it so smeared up you can't see where you're going. Don't overwork the skin when you're doing this. Don't go over the same spot too many times because you can chew the skin up too. You want to keep it one time over the skin is all you really need. And you can kind of go back and touch up any little spots if you missed anything. And just keep putting ink in and wiping it as you go. Just remember you still have the dark side, so you want to start where your dark shading was and work over to the light side of the tattoo. Small circles. When you get to the edge of those petals, you can kind of flip shade them out a little bit like I was doing with the black. It'll give it a little softer look. Bring that up almost to the edge like I said. And that's pretty much it for the red. Now we've got the machine all cleaned out of red. We cleaned it with the green soap. Now we're going to put the green in. Green, there's certain colors that are a little more difficult to put in. Greens, blues. It's just the way the skin takes the ink. You don't want to overwork it. Nice small little circles I'm doing. You'll get a feel for your own machine. You'll know how close to the line you're getting. Sometimes it looks like you've got a lot of ink and you can't even see the line, but when you wipe it off, it's right there. You'll get used to how your machine is, and you'll be able to see the needle coming up towards the edge of the tattoo, so you'll know how close you're getting. And again, you can see I'm leaving a little bit of highlight areas in these leaves. I'm not coloring them like a coloring book, solid green, because we're going to put a little bit of highlights in there. The center of the leaves, you want to start the green out at the center and work it out towards the edge. Just kind of fade it out of the edges. Small circles in the middle and then just kind of fade it out. Again, most people would probably just color this all solid green. And you're going to see I'm going to take some yellow and put some yellow highlights on the edges of these leaves and stuff, and it'll make a completely different look to it. So we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to wipe it all off, put a little thin coat of Vaseline, clean the machine out. Make sure your machine is really clean now, that you flushed it out real good with that green soap and alcohol before you put the light colors in. Now you want to take a little bit of yellow and just, you can go over the green with the yellow too. It won't hurt it. It'll kind of give it a nice look. It'll add a couple different tones to the green. It won't just be all one solid color. To get different shades of green, you can either mix some yellow in the green, or you could have taken these leaves, you could have colored them solid yellow first, and then go over them with green. I've seen that done, and that works pretty good too for a different look. And then just follow around it and just do little highlights and spots. It'll give it a nice look. The whole thing you're trying to achieve here is to get some dimension to the whole tattoo, not make it look flat in one solid color. A little bit on the tips of those. Just remember to keep small circles when you're putting the ink in. Never go straight back and forth with the machine like this. You can tear the skin up, and the ink won't actually go in as well. Just two little ones at the top here. Just get the little points in there with some yellow. Then we're going to spray it off here, just so you can see what it looks like now. And there you go. Now we're just gonna, the last thing we're gonna do with this tattoo, we're just gonna put some white highlights in around the edge of each one of those petals on the rose. Put a little Vaseline down. White, when you use white ink, you'll see it's gonna come out of the tube pretty quick, and it does smear. You gotta just be careful with it, just go a little bit slower when you're going around the tattoo. This white ink will look almost a pinkish shade because there's a certain amount of blood that's already in the skin until it heals. Once it heals, the blood will dissipate and it'll just leave the ink and the pigments in the skin, and the white highlights will make a big difference in the way the tattoo looks. After you see this, when it's all finished, look around at people, and a rose is a kind of a common tattoo you can find, and just look at other people's work and you can see the things that they left out. And you'll probably see there won't be a lot of shading in it, you won't see any white highlights in it, the yellows in there, but all these things will make it look much better. One more here, a little bit around the edge. And then we're just going to spray it off. Thanks for watching the first video in our series. Remember, a clean, sterile work environment and clean equipment are essential. Use new needles on every tattoo. Check with your local and state ordinances before you start a tattoo business.